Welcome back, Focus Learners, to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into one of the most unprecedented, frankly mind-blowing trajectories in modern business history. I mean, look at the modern landscape. It's almost impossible to untangle our daily lives from one very specific company. We are talking about a true modern titan here, a company that didn't just, capture a market, but actually went ahead and rewired our entire global infrastructure. So we're going to unpack the foundational business strategies and the historical context behind this massive shift just to truly understand how this transformation happened. How Amazon changed the world. Take a second and just let that sink in. It's a heavy, massive statement, right? But the thing is, it isn't being posed as a theory. It is a bold, declarative statement of absolute fact, derived straight from our source material. We aren't just talking about a business experiencing your standard run-of-the-mill corporate growth here. By establishing entirely new baselines for logistics, cloud computing, and what we as consumers expect, Amazon fundamentally altered our global reality. This sets the stage for a narrative that changed literally how we live, how we consume, and how the modern marketplace even operates. Okay, let's dive into this. A small online bookstore. Back in 1994, Jeff Bezos launched this company from a literal garage in Bellevue, Washington. And books? Well, books were chosen specifically because they were this perfect strategic starting point. They were non-perishable, super easy to ship, and most importantly, they offered a catalog so massive that no physical brick-and-mortar store could ever hope to hold them all. This humble origin isolates the concept for us. If you think about the wide-open real estate of a 16:9 widescreen, a tiny bookstore is just a speck in that space. It forces us to acknowledge that way before the massive fulfillment centers and endless data farms, this was just a highly constrained, hyper-focused experiment in the very early days of the internet. To really comprehend the mechanics of this insane growth, we have to strictly define this starting block. The source material emphasizes this small online bookstore to establish a baseline. You have to put yourself back in the mid-90s context. The internet was just a novelty. Dial-up connections were painfully slow, and consumer trust? The idea of putting a credit card online was practically zero. Nobody was doing it. The underlying logic here is powerful. Every giant starts small, usually by solving one very, very specific problem exceptionally well. You simply cannot appreciate the soaring heights of their current dominance without first understanding the very real physical constraints of where the climb actually began. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer magnitude of the gap between the start and the end point. It's a total David to Goliath contrast. On one end, we have that tiny operation where, famously, a physical bell would ring in the office every single time an order was placed. Imagine that. And on the other end, we have the global giant shipping literally billions of packages annually. This is the ultimate business evolution, but fascinatingly, it's completely contained within a single entity's timeline. This huge delta, from a handful of employees packing books on their hands and knees on a concrete floor to a fully automated global logistics network, that is the core thesis we're exploring today. Which brings us to the absolutely essential question we have to ask ourselves. How did a small bookstore change the world? Seriously, how does an entity jump from a niche internet experiment to a dominating global force? Well, this is where the mechanics of explosive growth come into play. We're moving out of that intimate, charming origin story and pivoting directly into the sheer momentum of scale. This question is the bridge. It connects the humble beginnings to the specific, relentless business strategies that created an earth-shattering outcome. Let's map this out so we can clearly see the exact architecture of this transformation. We start at year one, the small online bookstore. This was all about proving the core e-commerce model. Then we move into the transitional era, year X. The source text calls this a fascinating story. And man, is it ever. This is the period of relentless compounding. We're talking the launch of Amazon Prime in 2005, the creation of Amazon Web Services, integrating third-party sellers, the whole shebang. And finally, we arrive at year Y, the global giant, absolute dominance. By laying it out like a timeline, we get a clear, structured roadmap of the journey from a single product category to the ultimate everything store. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this source deliberately labels the transition itself. It calls it a fascinating story because, honestly, it completely defied standard corporate expectations. This whole transition was built on massive, calculated risks. Launching Amazon Prime, for example, analysts at the time thought it was a crazy, money-losing proposition. They said it would tank the company. But actually, scratch that, it did the exact opposite. That risk locked in unprecedented customer loyalty and created a powerful flywheel effect. So calling it a fascinating story implies these bold twists and completely unprecedented strategies that served as the vital connective tissue between being small and becoming a giant. And that fascinating story leads exactly here. The global giant. We're talking about an entity that boasts absolute, undeniable worldwide reach. To put this into some concrete perspective for a second, Amazon Web Services alone powers a massive percentage of the entire internet's infrastructure. It's wild. Their logistics networks rival, and very often surpass, national postal services. This is the exact polar opposite of where the story began. We've shifted from a highly specific retail operation into a boundless, unstoppable force that literally... So the crucial point is that being a global giant meant completely shattering traditional borders. The original definitions of what a retail business could be were just overrun. Amazon didn't just stay in e-commerce. They expanded into hardware with the Kindle and Echo devices. They moved into major media production with Amazon Studios. They entered the physical grocery market by buying Whole Foods. The entity grew so incredibly large that it became this uncontainable mass, proving that a company's reach is really only limited by its willingness to aggressively build new infrastructure. And because of that massive, uncontainable momentum, it became the entity. That changed. It didn't just change retail logistics by making 2-day shipping the default expectation for everyone, everywhere. It fundamentally disrupted cloud computing, creating a multi-billion-dollar industry practically from scratch. It changed how we read. It changed how we watch movies. It changed how we interact with technology right in our own living rooms. The world. Full stop. We emphatically return to that anchor phrase from the very beginning of our source text. This single entity fundamentally altered the entire global landscape. The Amazon effect forced every other competitor on the planet to radically adapt their supply chains and their customer service models, or face total extinction. The impact was absolute. It was total, and it undeniably rewired consumer behavior across the globe. There's just no going back. Let's move to and see how this builds into our final takeaways for today. We've extracted the core business lessons from our source material here. First, it started as a small online bookstore, proving the absolute power of dominating a focused, constrained niche. Second, it experienced a fascinating story of growth, leveraging massive calculated risks like Prime and AWS. Third, it became a global giant, scaling its logistics and tech infrastructure relentlessly. And finally, fourth, it changed the world through an absolute, uncompromising obsession with the customer. These 4 pillars form the complete architectural blueprint of this historic transformation. Which leaves us with a pretty profound thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. We've tracked the timeline, we've seen the strategic risks, and we've analyzed the transformation from a single product website to an omnipresent, world-altering force. So I leave you with this. If a simple, highly constrained online bookstore possessed the hidden potential to completely rewire our global infrastructure, what seemingly small idea out there right now is quietly writing its own fascinating story? What current garage startup is secretly building the infrastructure of tomorrow? Keep your eyes open, focused learners, because the next world-changing story is already beginning. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one.